Hey guys, I'm James and welcome to Mostly Helpful, and in today's video I want to talk to you about this. This is my wife's Mercedes B250e full electric car. Now Mercedes have recently launched a car they call the B250e, and it's a hybrid based on the 2020 platform. So if you're here to hear about that one, that is not the car we are talking about today. This car is a car that was launched in 2014 in the US, 2015, late 2015 in the UK, which is obviously where I'm from, and is a full electric car that runs a sort of combination of Tesla battery and motor and Mercedes control electronics. Not a big seller in the UK, just based on figures from that fantastic website, How Many Left, about 300 or so in the UK. Now, I don't want Mostly Helpful to be a car review channel, because after all there's more than enough of those already on YouTube. But there were a lot of reviews taken or given at the time when this came out. Fully Charged Show did a review, a number of other people have done reviews of this car, but they are given by people who get that car for a couple of days. They're journalists and they haven't necessarily lived with them. So this is going to be a review of a family use of an electric car for the last year, which is how long we've had it. Funny enough, shortly after buying it, we had to get it MOT'd, and that's exactly where I'm on my way to now, my local Mercedes dealer, for its annual service and MOT. Now, you might wonder what gets done in an annual service, and on this car we have a service plan. It's very inexpensive, it's £16 a month for 2 years, and that gets you 2 services. And as far as I can tell, they did some brake fluid last year, they do the pollen filter, and then they do something called a desiccant cartridge. And this particular car, whether it's a Tesla thing or it's a Mercedes thing, I'm not sure, needs a desiccant cartridge, which I think is a silica pouch that sits in the battery and absorbs some moisture. Now, some of the things that people spoke about at the time during those early reviews was that how much more comfortable this electric B-Class was than its petrol or diesel powered equivalent. And indeed they look slightly different on the road. I think this one is elevated up slightly to give a bit more ground clearance, because the battery is down in the bottom of the car and would presumably run the risk of scraping over the many speed bumps our country is inflicted with. But equally, I don't know what cars those people were driving outside of 2015 B-Classes, because the Golf that I recently acquired for very little money rides considerably better than this does. You might hear it thumping over the potholes as we're driving along this road. Now, this particular model is the Electric Art Premium, so it does come with the 18-inch alloy wheels. And we know that, everyone knows that big wheels ruin a ride. But equally, I've had plenty of other cars with 18-inch alloy wheels and they work absolutely fine. So it is true that being an electric car, the drivetrain is much smoother. There's no gear changes, of course. But my previous car that you might also have seen on the channel, my C350 diesel, that generally was a much better car for comfort in terms of physically sitting in the car and also the ride. I think the other thing to think about is, everyone always says that electric cars are loads of fun to drive, and I don't get this at all. If your idea of fun is burning off the lights, and ironically I'm sat at some lights, and zooming up to 30 miles an hour as quickly as you can, then I guess electric cars are very fun. But if your idea is, you know, looking for rev range, hitting that noise crescendo, getting that gear change exactly right, then obviously an electric car is no fun at all. And in fact, I find it perfectly pleasant, don't get me wrong, but it is what I'd call a very one-dimensional drive. You press go or you press stop, and there's nothing else you really need to do. Steer around, I suppose. That notwithstanding, this is a very kind of pleasant little town runaround. And that's mainly why we use it. My wife's commute went from 70 miles a day to 3 miles a day, and rather than do that on a Audi Q5 diesel with all the risk of bunging up the particulate filter, it was felt that an electric car would be interesting to own and the right thing to have. And in fact, it has been very interesting. It's taught me a lot about why I don't think the UK, or whether it's the UK or Europe, I don't think a typical person on the street is ready for an electric car. And I'll give you a reason why. This car runs it's supposedly a 28 kilowatt hour battery. The suggestions are that it's actually 36 and that you're just not charging it fully. And when you're using the 28 kilowatt hour capacity, am I saying that? Yeah, that is right. You get about 80 miles of range. On a day like today where it's -2, that is going to be a bit compromised. This particular car, and quite a lot of the B250s, were available with an option called the range extender, which enables you to tap into a bit more of the battery, but really it's only going to give you another 10 to 15%. So at a push, on a really nice summer's day, if you don't smash it down the motorway at the national speed limit, you might get 100 miles out of it. And that has been a constraint for us, and I think it will continue to be a constraint for a lot of people. Now, I can hear a number of you saying, yes, but Teslas have got 250 miles of range. And whilst that absolutely is true, the UK is awash with Nissan 24 kilowatt Nissan Leafs, and their theoretical range is about 65, 70 miles on a day like today, with no range extender. Now, they have the ability to be fast charged, and this car lacks that. So you could do your 65, 70 miles, find a fast charger, and then do another 65 or 70. And in this particular car, you absolutely can't do that. The fastest this will charge off a 3-phase supply is taking an 11 kilowatt input. So from empty, even with that, you're still looking at a sort of 3-hour, 4-hour charge time. The other thing is that I'm on some of the electric car forums, and these people, or a lot of the existing people driving around in EVs, except maybe Teslas and people with I-Paces, they are enthusiasts, and they do really like to plan their routes and take advantage of opportunity to use their cars to go on tours of Scotland and this kind of thing. But I think for a lot of people, just being able to get in your car and drive a 100-mile round trip without worrying about whether you'll get back with enough charge, it remains a constant constraint. And if you're not an enthusiast and you don't want to plan your route around the fairly grim motorway service station network in the UK, then I think this will continue to be a constraint. I am nearly at the MOT centre, so let's pause there. I'm going to give you a tour of the car and its features, although for all intents and purposes it's just a Mercedes B-Class, and then you'll join me back in the car, hopefully when I've got a pass, and I can tell you a little bit more about the ownership. One of the interesting things about the B-Class, the electric B-Class, the 250e, is how little concession was made to it being electric. And in fact, almost everything in the car is exactly as it would be if you had your petrol or diesel version. And the nice things I like about the boot, though, is not only is it a good size, but also you have this kind of concealment floor, which is where the charge cable and oddments live, but it also is adjustable, so you can drop it down like that, and you get a bit more height, which has proven useful in the past. Like all good hatchbacks, it's got split fold seats. Let's just get this up. There we go. 60/40 at the back, and usual stuff, 3 headrests and this retractable cover. All very ordinary B-Class. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we've used this as a family, and there is a good amount of space back here. There is we've had 2 children's car seats in here, and there's still been plenty of room for them. And if I show you, admittedly I'm not particularly tall, but there is still plenty of legroom down here. No dramas there. If we look in the Dashboard, again, all very normal B-class. The electric stuff, there's a couple of buttons here. One relates to economy, sport mode. One's the preheat, and then the very important one, the range extender, just next to the hazard warning there here. There we go. And that's the one that gives you your extra 10 or 15%. Otherwise, it's all very much, as I say, like a normal car. So much so, in fact, that when you go to start it, you have to use the key as if it were a completely normal engine, and there is almost an ignition and then a start sequence to fire everything up. So here's that key business. Here is your standard Mercedes key, familiar to anyone who's had a Mercedes of this era. And here you go, you pop it in this slot here, like that. Steering column unlocks, ignition on, and then you have to put your foot on the brake and then turn it like that. And then you hear the sounds, turn that off, of the cooling motor, the battery cooling system or heating system firing up. And now you can shut the door and drive off. But that seems very odd, doesn't it, with an electric car, that you have to use a very ordinary key. That's caught me out a few times, that you have to start the car and then you turn it off like that, and then you wind the key out, and there you go. Very old school for an electric car, at least. In terms of charging point, this system has come under fire from owners because it's a bit stiff. You have to really push it in to get it open, and I could imagine if you're running low on power and you need access to that, that'd be a bit panicky. But there we are, that's exactly like you might have in a car. Put your nozzle in there, but instead there's a Type 2 socket. There's a couple of indicators here just to tell you when you're charging and when the cable is locked in. I was a bit nervous about electric cars generally, that you've got this big flap here that could very easily be knocked, particularly when you're parked up at a supermarket, people squeezing between cars and so on, and could easily get bumped out. But it's not happened to us, and hopefully won't happen to you if you've got your eyes on one of these. One of the other things that's rather unusual about this car is that when you're plugged in to charge, and admittedly I'm not currently plugged in, there is nothing on the dashboard to tell you that you are charging. It seems very remiss. Normally up in other cars there's some indicators, and in fact you might think that this up here was something to do with it, but that's actually to do with the parking. If I just do this, one other thing about this car is it does seem particularly electricity thirsty when you initially start up. And let's just turn it on a second. There we go. Power fold mirrors, very helpful. And you spend your time looking at the miles per kilowatt hour. Now, I have been on a very short journey recently, and this will have been running as part of the service this morning, but 1.2 miles per kilowatt is terrible. It looks like they've reset it as part of everything they've done today, but running average prior to going into the dealership was something like 1.9. It's still very low, partly I think because we use it for short journeys, but there are other cars out there getting nearer to 3, sometimes 4 in the right conditions, and it's this that compromises its range. Some of that is done by the fact that there's this motor or pump and coolant that's designed to heat the battery when it's cold and cool the battery when it's hot, and that takes presumably a reasonable amount of power. Then behind all this system is all the other usual Mercedes stuff. So you've got navigation, audio, Bluetooth, telephone, all of that, completely normal stuff. And then there's a couple of extra things here for electric. In theory, you can tell it what time you're leaving and it will heat the car, although I've never got it to work, and a number of other features. And then down here you can see this is your battery level, and over here is your e-cell, which is effectively saying when it's ready, let's turn it on, that it can give, it's set to max, because that means you could get full acceleration. What's interesting here is that we're kind of between 1/2 and 3/4 on the battery, and it's still showing 65 miles, and this was fully charged this morning. And the range, yeah, the range is a challenge, definitely. So guys, I'm back. It's a bit sunnier than it was earlier this morning, and I'm delighted to say that the car has passed the MOT. It's been serviced as well, and as I mentioned, pollen filter, desiccant cartridge, and a quick look around. They sent me one of those safety videos, showed me my tyres, but all good. So what's my conclusion then after a year or 13 months of owning this car and driving it? We haven't used it as much as I'd have liked because of lockdown, but also partly because of that range issue. I'll give you an example. My parents live 75 miles away, and I have two young children, 4 and 6. So as a family, the four of us, when we get in the car and go and see them, we will drive for an hour and 20 minutes, arrive at my parents', and then we'll have Sunday lunch or whatever it is, and then we will drive home. And in a normal powered car, that's absolutely doable. One of the things of having young children is that they don't like to hang around sitting in the back cars while you charge up. So even if this car had rapid charge, I'd have probably done that once and then used one of the other cars in the household. And typically there's always at least one other petrol or diesel car at any one time while we've owned this one. And I think that's the thing really, is that even if this did have rapid charge, the fact that it can only go 80 miles before it needs charging, whether that be rapid or non-rapid, I think it remains a problem for people who aren't kind of enthusiasts and or don't want to kind of spend 30 minutes of their time sat waiting for their car to charge. But that aside, I think as a concept, electric cars are fantastic. Once they get 300 miles out of a battery reliably, and then the only time you rapid charge is if you're going on a 600-mile trip to Scotland, and then all the other use cases you can charge at home, I think that will work brilliantly. This car I do really like. I mentioned earlier it's not the most exciting thing to drive, but it's very well finished, and it's got nice leather seats, and it's got heated seats and sat nav and all of those good things. So there's absolutely no issue with it as a car outside of the things that I've been talking about in terms of electric cars. Sadly though, it is time for this car also to leave the house. After 13 months, my wife has decided that it doesn't meet her needs, and that she wants something that enables her to go and see her friends in far away corners of the UK that are more than 50 miles away. And she also said something which I think is rather interesting, which is that recently we've been told that come 2030 we are not going to be able to buy brand new petrol or diesel cars. And so she's decided that for the next 9 years she's going to take advantage of the fact that she can buy new petrol and diesel cars, and will go and buy herself something new and petrol based. That's what she said. Because from that point onwards in 2030, if you want a new car, you are going to have an alternatively fueled vehicle. And I wonder if other people are thinking that. So in summary, I think a B250e is in itself a really nice EV, as long as your requirements meet its constraints with respect to range. They are turning up at around between 12 and 16,000 pounds. I haven't seen many in the dealer network, the main dealer network, for a little while. There were a few around when we bought this a year ago, although we didn't buy main dealer. But I think as the prices fall and people can run them as second cars rather than primary cars, then they become much more interesting. And as a little town run around, as you saw me driving this morning, it works very, very well. I would love to do more car reviews on this channel, but that isn't really what this channel's about. But I think it's important to sort of give a view of what owning an EV is like, rather than just as a journalist viewpoint or as somebody who's completely wedded to the concept. We thought we'd give it a try. We've given it a try. We've had a good year of using it, and I think it's safe to say that for us right now, as a primary car in the household, or as my wife's primary car, it doesn't suit her needs enough. So I hope that's helpful, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and do leave me comments and any feedback that you have. I'd be interested to know what you think. I know that there are people out there who are fanatical about EVs and you think they are absolutely the answer, but hopefully I've been able to give you a balanced viewpoint based on our ownership experience. So do leave me a comment, as I say, do leave me a like if you enjoyed this video, and thank you ever so much for watching, and I look forward to catching up with you soon. Thanks and goodbye. Good luck.